I just wanted to say a couple words about why I'm here, because a couple years ago, I'd never heard of epigenetics. I had these autistic kids. I had absolutely no idea why they could have autism. And then a whole bunch of weird things happened, which gave me an idea about why they might have autism. So this is that story. We know that autism rates are increasing. I hope that we're way past the time when we're saying that it's just better diagnosis. It's clearly much more than better diagnosis. And there's another part of the autism community that says, well, you know, it's genetic. We find all these genetic patterns, right? So we have an increase, but it's genetic. So how could that be? You can't have a genetic epidemic. My question today is, why can't you have a genetic epidemic or an epigenetic epidemic? I think you can. I have to talk about me a little bit. I was born in 1965 in West Los Angeles to a prosperous Jewish family with no history of mental illness, developmental disorder, disability of any sort. My husband's also from LA. Again, no history of any abnormality. And this is me. And we got married. We had 3 kids. Everything was normal as can be. Normal conceptions, normal pregnancies, normal deliveries. No unusual exposures. I don't take drugs. I don't even take pharmaceuticals. Two of them were natural childbirth. They were born. They had high APGAR scores. They were and continue to be absolutely gorgeous children with no physical abnormalities at all. But 2 of our 3 children have pretty severe autism. One's 14 and one is 7. And autism means different things to different people. In our case, Johnny is totally nonverbal and what you would probably call low functioning. He is sweet as can be and adorable, but pretty much can't even put on his own socks. Our daughter Sophie has some language, but it's like, I want chocolate. It's very basic, very simple language, and can't engage in anything remotely like a conversation. So I had these kids, and I really, honestly, I had just completely given up, even wondering what happened to them. There was no answers coming from anywhere. And it's a very long story. I don't want to go into the myriad details about what happened. It would take me a while. But about 2.5 years ago or so, the strangest thing happened, and that's that I obtained my own prenatal records. And I just have to ask, how many of you have seen your own prenatal records? Okay, for the record, I want to say nobody raised their hand. Okay, I still haven't met anyone else who has seen their own prenatal records. The fact that I got this was one of the freakiest things that I could have imagined. And the very short story is my mother's obstetrician had them on microfilm, and I had thought to ask for them for a variety of reasons. So I got the records, and there were like 4 pages, and I'm not a doctor, and it was all this kind of chicken scratch from 1965, and I couldn't really make heads or tails of it, and I put it away thinking, okay, whatever, it's probably not important. But then in November of 2011, as a lot of you know, I'm really freaky about nutrition, right? And I read a lot about nutrition, I listen to a lot of lectures about nutrition, and a nutrition expert was talking about how the fact that a mother's nutrition when she's pregnant affects not just her fetus, but also her grandchildren because of the development of the germ cells inside the fetus. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, wait, maybe my eggs were affected by something in my prenatal record. So I went back and I found these records and far more carefully tried to decipher them. And what I found were these words I really didn't understand. The one word I didn't understand was dilutavol, 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 and there was also what looked like prednisolone. I'm like, what is this? I'd never heard of this. I'd heard of prednisone, of course, but I had no idea what it was. So I typed in the word dilutavol into Google Scholar, and only one record came up. And it's this study that was published in 1977. And it was called Prenatal Exposure to Synthetic Progestins and Estrogens, Effects on Human Development. It was written by June Reinisch. And I looked at this study and realized that I was one of the 71 offspring who was the cohort, the subjects of this study. And I looked and I saw that dilutavol was a mix of progestins and some estradiol, some estrogen. Anyway, so I put two and two together. I figured out, and by the way, I never talked to my mother about this. She doesn't even know what she took. I put two and two together and realized that my records showed that I had been exposed to these synthetic hormones from the very beginning of pregnancy through at least the end of the second trimester. So, having this background in nutritional freakiness that I do, I thought, okay, well, it wasn't just me who was exposed to these synthetic hormones, it was also my eggs, right? Because all of us girls were all born with all of our eggs. And if you're a male, you're born with your, you guys know the terms better than me, spermatogonial stem cells, or, a protospermatozoa. So could those cells have been affected in some negative way by these exposures? And I had known, because I was really interested in the subject of DES, diethylstilbestrol, which was an anti-miscarriage hormone, a synthetic estrogen, which was used from the 40s until about 1971. I knew about epigenetics only through my interest in DES. Now, I wasn't DES exposed, but again, it's a synthetic hormone. So I began to get this idea that maybe my eggs had been epigenetically affected. And then, of course, I thought, well, am I the only one? Am I the only one who had these crazy exposures that, most people haven't heard of? And it turns out, no, millions and millions and millions and millions of people had these exposures to synthetic hormone drugs, not just DES, even though DES is best known. Dr. Reinisch, who studied this, says that the progestins were more often used than the estrogens, and there were also the corticosteroids and thyroid hormones and other things. And we don't have, we're the United States, right? We don't collect data. So we don't know exactly, but we know it's millions. And these are just some ads for DES, for a progestin, for a glucocorticoid. That's also DES. And this is a list from Dr. June's paper showing the different synthetic hormones that were used at the time. But it wasn't just the hormones that were used. We forget that from the roughly the 1940s on, there was this period that I call the prenatal pharmaceutical craze. And women were very heavily medicated, from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. With a variety of kinds of drugs, because the medical profession didn't believe that the fetus would be affected. And there were anti-nausea drugs. So these, if you look at this one called Mornidine, it says, now she can cook breakfast again when you prescribe new Mornidine. Now these are all ads, aimed at doctors, right? Because they didn't have direct-to-consumer advertising then. But these are specifically targeting pregnant women. It really wasn't thought to be a problem to prescribe them these drugs even in the first trimester. They were given amphetamine, methamphetamine for weight loss. Doctors told women not to gain more than about 20 pounds. I've met women who were given these drugs. And of course, thalidomide right here also goes by the name of Distavol. Is the notorious sedative that caused those horrific birth defects. Miltown was given to millions of women. It was a very, very, very popular sedative in the 50s. And so I found out about this huge history, what I think is one of the most toxic events in human history. And almost no one knows about it. And none of us know of our own prenatal exposures. I mean, I would never, ever in 5 billion years have guessed if I hadn't had access to that one page. I would never have known. And I've never met anyone else who knows for sure what they were exposed to. But of course, it's not just these ancestral exposures that came via pharmaceuticals. We have DDT, of course, that was widely used in that era. We, of course, have dioxin, smoking, which I think is actually huge, flame retardants, synthetic, hormones used for contraception and recreational drugs, and more and more and more and more. I'm sure you'll hear about more of them very shortly. So, I opened asking if we could have a genetic epidemic. My question is, did the medications, the drugs, the endocrine disruptors, the toxics lay a foundation for a latent quasi-genetic epidemic via unanticipated germline impairment? Sorry, that's kind of a mouthful, but I couldn't think of a better way to ask the question. And I wonder if there's something that we can reasonably call germline teratogens. We know about teratogenic drugs affecting a fetus, but never in the history of the FDA or any pharmaceutical regulation has anybody looked at the issue of whether or not substances can also be germline teratogens. And if so, can these disturbances manifest as abnormal neurodevelopment in the resulting offspring? And my final question is, if we think that's true, if we think that's possible, and personally I think it's possible, I'm a lawyer, and we always evaluate evidence by what's called the standard of proof, right? So what's our standard of proof here? I'm not only asking about the evidence, I'm asking, when do we start to worry? Do we say we need to research this for 10 more years? Do we say we should worry now? Do we say maybe someone should tell the FDA they should worry about germline? What is the policy level where we begin to worry? And then finally, I just want to thank so many people. I didn't list everybody, but I've talked the ear off of dozens of people over the last year, and you've been so helpful, so thank you.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was created in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other brain disorders are helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.